Welcome to 52 Authors, 52 Weeks, Season 3. I'm Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, the Growth Motivator. Each week, I sit down with a different author to explore what lies behind the pages. Growth, purpose, finding your voice. Enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. Today, I am joined by author Laura Segal Stegman, author of The Summer of L.U.K. All Things Are Possible. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk.
So, before we get into the book, we're not going to tell them everything that's in the book. They have to get their own copy. Why don't you tell our listening, viewing audience a little bit about your background?
Okay. I um I have a degree in drama from college because I wanted to be an actress when I was growing up. And after graduating college, I sort of lost that wish. I didn't like the lifestyle. I wanted a little bit of a more secure lifestyle. So I have a career. I've had a career for many, many years as a public relations consultant. And I've represented a number, mostly arts type organizations like classical music orchestras or theater companies, and a few other things. And I've loved that career. And but when I was probably about 20 years ago, a little more actually, I started looking for something to do that involved writing. And my writing work as a PR consultant was like press releases and bios and pitch letters to try to get stories placed in different media outlets. And I love the idea of telling a story about a client that would make a media person interested in doing an interview with them. And and then I started remembering how when I was a kid, I loved reading middle grade books, books for kids that were, 8 to 12. And I read all the time. And I remember many of the books that I read helped me understand that some of the problems that every kid has, um, I wasn't alone. I found myself in books. I didn't think any of my friends, felt a certain way about this or that. And so I just thought, you know, maybe I could write a book that would help a kid today, you know, um, understand that they were not alone. And so I started thinking about a book that was uh, about kids communicating with each other and with the world. And that's how I came up with an idea for Summer of L.U.K. And I can talk more about the plot of that later. But the larger story here is that I wrote a first draft. It took me a couple of years because I didn't do it um, uh, consistently. And I thought it was great when I finished it, and I was gonna become a literary star, I thought. And, I when I started showing it to people, I realized that I really wasn't, I didn't know enough about writing fiction. I also was thinking of all the books I read when I was a kid, and children's literature today has changed a lot. So for over the next many, many, many years, I learned how to be a fiction writer. I worked with a development editor. I worked with other writers. I started trading pages with people and seeing what they were writing, and through all that, through those many years, I really learned my craft. And so, when I started, I had already been submitting the book and just getting rejection after rejection. And when I started getting not rejections, I would get more interest. Maybe not, I didn't get an agent, I didn't get a publisher acceptance yet, but I was getting closer and I could tell my work was better. And then I got finally I got a yes from a publisher, and I got a 3-book contract for Summer of Luck and the 2 sequels that I hadn't written yet. And I was already working on the second book, which is called Ready or Not. And my publisher, the original, the first edition of Summer of Luck was published in 2020, and I was excited about the other 2 coming out in the next couple of years. And then, as happens in the publishing industry, my publisher um, went out of business. But I one of the themes sort of in my work as a writer is perseverance, because I never gave up on my book. Every time I have hundreds and hundreds of rejections over the years. And I had to sort of come up with a way to not take them personally, which is very difficult. But I managed to because I love this book, Summer of Luck. I love the kids. I love what happens to them. I love how they learn self-acceptance. It's about 3 struggling kids who meet at summer camp, and they stumble on a magical carnival haunted by a ghost who helps them find their way to self-acceptance. That's what Summer of Luck is about. And I wanted kids to read this book, and that's what kept me going. So was very fortunate to find another publisher who not only, you know, gave me a 3-book contract, but agreed to reissue Summer of Luck in its second edition, which is the cover that you showed, and the other 2 books. So the reissued version of Summer of Luck came out in 2022, and the other 2 books came out in the 2 following years. So I've got all 3 books out. They're also available in audiobook form. And my career as an author um, has brought me so much joy. And all the rejection, I still get rejection because I'm working on some other books, and lots of rejection. Um, but if I focus on doing it for the joy of it, and in telling a story that I hope a kid is going to mean something to a kid today who reads it, you know, I'm good. I'm good. And I've done school visits. I've done panels at literary events. I've done blog posts. I mean, really, I still am a publicist. I still do PR consulting, but really most of my time is spent on my career as a writer, and I've never been happier in my life.
I love that. So let's get into the book a little bit more. We got about 20 minutes left of our time together. So you opened the door to one aspect of the book. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. So, at the heart of your Summer of Luck, all things are possible. There's the 3 children, Darby, Justin, and Nas, who this really touched me. They're each struggling to find their voice in different ways, right?
Right.
And I remember being 19 years old, a brand new mother, lost my voice. And it was because of my daughter, who was born with special needs, that I found my voice because I had to be hers. But what drew you to explore communication silence and perfectionism through a middle grade lens?
That's a really good question. I I feel like the idea of finding one's voice is was a incredibly important experience that I had in my life. And of course, most of us don't find our voices as kids. We have to sort of grow up. Sometimes we have to get extra help. And that's what I really wanted kids to know, that that if they weren't able to find their voices, they could do it. And they could do it not with the help of a ghost, because not everybody has a ghost. But the ghost doesn't fix them. He helps them see how they can help themselves and how they can accept themselves just as they are. So I had to come up with I also, when I was a kid, I loved books with a kind of little bit of magic. And so this book is set in a summer camp in the real world. And I decided that if these kids would sort of hear um, this funny music, the kind of music that you hear on a carousel, which is the calliope music, and they'd each hear it separately. And then when they met each other, when they met at camp, they would be able to hear each other's thoughts. They would be telepathic. And not necessarily every thought they thought, but a thought that somebody would want to share. And so they were very confused by this at first, because it was not quite normal. Um, but they realized that they were able to communicate without having to use their voices. And Darby, who is 11, no, 10 in the first book, she stutters, and she's very embarrassed about her stutter. She's very her mother is very, critical, and she just doesn't like to talk because she feels embarrassed when she stutters. And Justin, who is 11 in the first book, he lost his father before the book starts, and has very hard time expressing his grief. So he just shuts down and doesn't talk at all. And Naz, the younger boy, who's 9 in the first book, he is from Morocco, where he speaks French and Arabic, but he and his mom moved to the United States for a job of hers for the summer, and he is just learning English. So I tried to come up with a variety of different experiences that kids might have, and they, like I said, they meet, they hear this magic music, and they're like, they can communicate without talking.
I love that. One of the things that has really been bothering me about today's educational system. So you're in Los Angeles, I'm in Chicago. I'm outside of Chicago, but it's easier just to say Chicago. But I feel like a lot of children don't have the love for reading that I developed as a kid. And I believe not that you can solve all the world problems that kids experience, but I think that they're losing their innocence so early that for me, when I read books, it took me to, different places. And I had a very vivid imagination because I had an imaginary friend um, that died once my sister was born.
Oh,
But I had a voice as a kid. I was always energetic. It's just that when I got 19 and had a baby, I lost my voice, but I quickly gained it back. But these kids today, I feel like they're struggling, and it happens very early in life. And I feel like this story can take them to a place where they can reclaim some of their innocence because it's being taken away too soon today, and it's really sad. It's hurtful.
yeah, definitely. And even though there are absolutely limits to how much kids can get their hands on books, due to a variety of reasons, um, ranging from books that are banned to just the unavailability, or kids have chores or whatever it is that keeps them from being able to read. But they also, a lot of kids I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? Struggles with reading a book, picking up a book and reading it. Some kids are dyslexic. Some kids just cannot sit still and read a book. But the good news is there are audiobooks now where you can listen to a book if you can't quite concentrate on the page. There are plenty of graphic novels that have pictures. I mean, I'm not talking about picture books for younger kids. I've read a number of graphic novels that are so beautifully done, and there's visuals right there. So most books, I would say, you can find in these different formats. So I think the hope is there that parents or caregivers or teachers will help kids find these resources. And the best place is to find a library in your local area, and you know get a library card, which is free, and check out books which are free, and you can download them to a phone, you can download them to a laptop, you could get a hard copy, whatever. you know I think it's made a difference to have all these books available in these different formats, because that really serves children who, like I said, are not sort of are struggling.
Yes, and they can hear the words, um, and typically can, because kids have vivid imaginations, right? So they can hear the words and think about the story that's being told. I remember being about 12 or 11, and I don't know how I got a hold to my mother's books, but I was reading, and this was, I want to say, late 70s, maybe early 80s, but I was reading Flowers in the Attic, Petals in the Wind. I don't know how I got my hands on those books, but I know I was always reading something. And one of the things I realized as I became an adult, I was reading the spicy novels. And then I stopped reading altogether because I was so immersed in healthcare. And there became a point in my life where I knew something was missing, and it was reading. And so once I started to read again, I am just at a place of peace because I have something that can take me away from everybody. And sometimes I will have a hard copy of the book along with the audio version because I'm listening, I'm highlighting, I'm underlining. I put the date that I read a book in the book because, sometimes you can be in one mindset um, while reading the book, and then you go back and read the book again, and you're a different mindset. And speaking of mindset, there was something I was going to ask you before I forget. So, you said that, and this is one of the themes of the book, perseverance, not talent alone, was your key to becoming a published author. You demonstrated that early on in our conversation. How did that mindset sustain you when you were just probably thinking this book wasn't gonna happen?
Well, that is so uh that still happens, by the way, with things I'm working on now. um but I was, for Summer of Luck, it was, I just figured I'm going to do this anyway. I'm not going to focus on the end results. I'm going to focus on the process. I'm going to focus on the revisions that I did over and over again, the editing, the relationships that I built with other authors, and the discovery that not every book that anybody writes gets published. Um, so I just gonna sort of answer your question in a little bit of a different way, because after I finished Summer of Luck and I had this amazing 2-book contract, 3-book contract, but I had to write 2 more books. And the second book came relatively easy because I already kind of had an idea of what it was going to be about. It's about Justin, the older boy. In this book, it's 1 year later, so he's a little older, and he struggling with a bully at summer camp, and he has to figure out how to um, stand up and do what's right. And I was very passionate about that subject. There was a lot of political things happening at the time I wrote that book, and I felt really strongly that kids needed to know how to face a bully. But the third book, I had no idea what it was going to be about. And um it took me, and I had a deadline. I had to finish this book by a certain time. Fortunately, I had some months, but the first book, going from the beginning to when it was published, was 20 years. The second book took me about 15 or 16 months. So obviously I was a better writer. And the third book took a little over a year. But I had a blank page. I didn't even have a title. I didn't know what it was going to be about. And I would sit down every night, because that's how I do my writing. After dinner, I go to the laptop and I open my file. And for a very long time, I didn't have a story, and I kept thinking to myself, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm going to fail." And yet I knew that I wanted to finish the trilogy, the story of these 3 kids, and I just kept opening that file and making notes. And then what I did was I went back to Summer of Luck, and I was flipping through it, and I noticed that the way that the ghost helps these kids see things in a different way than they could see them before is he takes them on these magical rides in his magical carnival. And they get to pick the ride they want to go on. And there's this room, and there's 8 choices. And the 3 rides they choose in the first book, were for the first book. But I noticed I had given a name to all the 8 doorways. And one of them was called The Chambered Nautilus, which is from a book that I read as a kid, a fiction book, one of my most influential books about uh, uh, a brother and sister, and they have their magic adventures. And the Chambered Nautilus, which is a, a sea creature with sort of, it's like it's round like a snail. Excuse me. I never forgot that. And I thought, well, maybe I can use that in my plot. So then at least I had an idea. And then every night opening the thing, and all of a sudden it came to me, because I didn't give up. I kept going even when I didn't think I could do it. And I mean, the book came out a year, almost 2 years ago. So I did manage to write a book, and I'm, really happy with the way that the idea that I came up with was that after these first 2 books where the ghost helps the kids, the third book is where the ghost needs the kids' help for himself. And they have to come back together. They're growing up. They're by that time 2 years older. So they're 14, 13, and 12. They're not so connected to each other anymore, but they make a decision to come together to help the ghost and get him back to rest permanently with his family. And I just love that that was the way I ended the trilogy. And these 3 kids are in good stead with their lives. They're confident. Their friendship is gonna last no matter what, whether they're close or not, whether they see each other or not. And I think that's a lesson that kids, you know, can learn. Like, they're not always needing to seek help. They can actually be of help to others. And that is, the lesson I'm hoping that kids who read all three books in the trilogy will learn.
You just read my mind because I was just about to say that in the book, these three children establish a community. And then outside of these three books, you've actually established a community of where you can help individuals own their story, right? Leveraging your experience as a PR specialist, which when you said, press releases and bios. I remember about 25 years ago, I was working for this consulting company and they had hired a marketing company to do my bio and all of that. And I was amazed at how that person brought my story to life, which I think that's a really cool skill to be able to have. So we are out of time, but
Hmm.
before we go, I would love to know what's next? So you got these 3 books out, they're done. I know there's something inside of you that has been swirling around in your brain as you delivered the first 3 babies.
Well, you are very perceptive. I have a fourth book that is not part of the series. It's a little bit autobiographical. It's a fiction middle grade book. It's about a 12-year-old girl who's very um, insecure and self conscious, and she likes to be by herself. And um, she ends up uh, visiting a drama festival at her middle school and decides, wow, she wants to be an actress, or she wants to act, and that brings her out of her room and helps her um, build her self-confidence. That's the very simplified plot of that book. And that book is finished. I worked on it for several years. I, did the same process where I would share it with other writers and get feedback. I was in a critique group, and that book is being considered right now, but I don't have a publisher for it yet. So we're
Okay.
crossing our fingers. But just to sort of close and not go over time, but I wanted to write another book, and I have started that book over and over again. I've written like 3 chapters or 5 chapters maybe, and then had to start over and rewrite them because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted my characters to do. And again, it's only by perseverance, like not giving up. I swear this happened a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I was talking to my friend, another writer friend, and she said, and I said, I'm giving up on this book. And she said, why? And, and I, and she said, tell me what tell me what it's about. And I told her, and she said, I think that's really interesting. And so sometimes you need help. You can't just going at it on my own doesn't always work. But if I share my struggles with others, I mean, I swear now I have an idea. I know where I'm going with this book, and I'm excited and ready to get back to it and go on. It's about two girls who are best friends, and their single parents end up getting married, which threatens the friendship, and they have to figure out how to be sisters. So,
Mm.
anyway.
Your books actually sound like they could be short movies, just because of the visual aspects of the words that you're bringing to life. I think it's important to own your story just as important as the page that is written on.
Yeah.
Um, I've been writing a book for the last 3 years, and I am a visual hold in your hand person. So I probably have 10 physical copies of the manuscript, and I'll go to different versions, right? Where I was like, "Oh, I don't want this in there anymore." But I'll go to Starbucks, I'll sit there, I'll read through the book. I'm thinking about what I want the reader to experience. And I don't have any characters in my book, but I could just imagine all the things that are going through your head. And I like the fact that no matter what, you keep going back to finish, even in those times where you think you can't. Someone in your community reminds you that you can, and you keep going. And that's why community is so important.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, can you tell our listening viewing audience where they can find you?
Yes, I have a website. It's laurastegman.com. And all my books are all three published books are on there. I also have information about my school visits and um, my webinars. I have webinars for authors, PR tips for authors, and how to write an author bio is one I just did recently. And it also, the website has links to where you can buy the books. You know, they're available anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookstop, including the audiobooks and little samples of the audio. There's links on that website too.
Oh, I love that. So, you just reminded me of something that I said I needed to do with this video podcast website. I'm not going to say it here. I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay.
But you just lit a fire to something that has been in my heart to do. And so now I need to jot down the strategy so I can get it done for 2026.
Yeah, and if you're listening out there and you don't think you can do something, and or people tell you you can't, don't listen to them. Find your own way and make sure that you follow your heart.
Thank you for that closing statement, because I was just about to ask you if you had any closing statements for our listening viewing audience. So you were right on time with that. Well, listen, everyone, I just finished chatting with Laura Segal Stegman, author of Summer of Luck. All things are possible. Until next week, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you real soon. Bye bye now. You've just experienced another conversation from 52 Authors, 52 Weeks, Season 3. The conversation may pause here, but the growth continues. I'm Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, the Growth Motivator, and I'll see you next week.